Hi everyone, I'm Rami. Today I'll be talking about Zeth. Specifically, I'll be overviewing how we were able to rapidly build Zeth and how metering works when you're running the EVM inside another VM. Clicker. Right, I do not have my speaker notes, so I'm going to be reading from my phone. Sorry about that in advance. Okay, so what is Zeth? Zeth is a type 1 ZK EVM, well, the first one to actually run. And the way it works is that we run the EVM inside our RISC-0 ZK VM. So we actually emulate the ZK EVM. What the RISC-0 ZK VM is essentially a ZK VM for programs rather than circuits. So you get full control flow, and you can run arbitrarily long computations. The ZK VM itself is based on RISC-V, which is a standard architecture used a lot in small IoT devices. And what that means for you is it can actually prove anything you can compile down to RISC-V. For now, our tools support Rust, full-on Rust. But theoretically, you can compile anything down to RISC-V and then use that inside the ZK VM. So there are a few flagship features, like continuations, which is what allows you to prove long computations, and composition, which is like a more generalized form of recursion. And amusingly, when we started out, people were not really convinced that we would get this to efficiently work. And today we can just probably say we can actually practically run an entire EVM and build Ethereum blocks within the ZK VM. More on this. So as I said, we're focused on Rust. That means you can run just about any Rust crate that you can compile down to RISC-V. The ones you cannot compile down to RISC-V are just mostly they have some hand-coded assembly inside them, so they're not just friendly to most architectures. And the way we actually build Zeth is that we relied on just other teams to do most of the work for us. So essentially, we rely on the REVM crate to actually just run the EVM. We rely on the Alloy crate for LLP coding and decoding. And then we add a bunch of glue to that, which also relies on the Ethers crate for RPC calls. Part of this glue is actually just to sparse our code Patricia try so that we don't actually load the entire Ethereum storage into memory, but only load the exact parts we need for authentication. So, because we could use all these crates, most of the work was actually done for us, and we got a working version done by 3 people, including me, just 4 weeks. Meanwhile, it actually took months for other teams to hand-write circuits for a Type 1 ZK EVM. So that was nice when you're dealing with programs and when you're building on top of the powerful Rust ecosystem, you get some perks. So that's lesson number 1, I guess, for anyone writing the next VM. Please write modular components that other people can just pull inside their projects, especially if the projects are based on the ZK VM. So, yeah, after we supported native Ethereum blocks, we also moved on to Optimism, to support building Optimism blocks within the ZK VM. And this also did not require much work. Optimism is quite EVM compatible, so it was only a matter of supporting some custom transactions, and then Revim rolled out Optimism support, so we deleted our work and then just, relied on that. Less to maintain, more power to us. My notes are actually just jumping forward. Yeah, so Optimism is a few more things than just another EVM chain. They have their own DA mechanism. And we also needed to prove that in zero knowledge. So that meant actually running their block derivation mechanism, zero knowledge, and that essentially is a program. It's not something you can easily do inside a circuit. So that actually required work, and we were not very happy about that, but nonetheless we did do it. We wrote that program to rederive the LP transactions from the Ethereum chain. And this all works fairly well due to composition, because we recursively, we actually roll up the roll-up. We stitch together derivation proofs for blocks to build derivation proofs for block sequences. So this all works today. You can actually go to the repo and try it out. So I was saying that we were not happy to do work. There's an existing RISC crate for doing this derivation process, which I'll not name because I'm not going to shame them. It's just that their license was not compatible with our Apache 2 license. So if I'm giving any advice here, please use flexible licenses so that people can build on your work, and then we don't have to do as much work. And why do we actually do this? So we do roll up these derivation proofs so that we can simplify the OP fraud proof mechanism potentially in the next iteration of the protocol. And also Steve here from All Labs was on the panel earlier. They're also on the same RFP for that OP work. There should be an image here for the repository, but it's not there. So aside from the image, this all works fairly well today. It's the first, type 1 ZK EVM you can deal with, use, and build on top of. There's also a project called Taiko, which has adopted our work and is building their own rollup based on it. So with Zeth, we also have features beyond the type 1 label, namely our LP support and the additional components for data availability in the chain. So when we released Zeth, we called it a type 0 ZKVM, just for the laughs. Yeah. And if you're interested in a deep code dive on the imaginary repository that should be in this slide, you can find me at some of the Hacker House events. We will be doing that. But for now, I guess you can just visit the RISC0 GitHub, which is this RISC that ends with a C and the number 0, /Zeth, and start proving some blocks or look at the code. So this ends the how we build Zeth segment. Now we start with how do we meter Zeth. So as I mentioned, we're actually running the EVM inside of another VM, which has some interesting consequences. So from a security perspective, the whole point of metering is just to avoid denial of service. So no one gives you some very large transactions that you just spend a very long time trying to execute or prove or do any of that. And the goal when deciding how to meter your transactions is roughly to make transactions that take longer cost more gas, and to know when to stop, essentially when you're past that gas limit. However, when you actually sit down and try to set how much gas each operation should cost, and you only consider complex instruction sets, like the ones your computers run, like x86, you might be unfair to reduced instruction sets, like RISC-V, which only has very few instructions, and they're very, very basic. So because the RISC-0 ZKVM relies on RISC-V, there are some huge discrepancies that you can hopefully see on these white slides. But to sort of go through it, for example, when you have the catch-up opcode, which costs only 30 gas and 9 additional gas for every 32 bytes, you have to pay 26,000 cycles as a base cost, and then 7,000 additional cycles for every 32 bytes. And cycles are basically the ZKVM equivalent of gas company, and they directly correspond to how much time or how much effort you have to spend to prove the resulting computation. So here you see a 1,000-fold blowup, but for an opcode like addition, which costs 3 gas, only have 104 cycles, only 104 cycles. This is mainly because there's a lot of overhead when emulating the EVM. You're not actually executing things opcode for opcode, but you have to keep track of additional details. But for subtraction, you see a very different blow-up, which goes up to 1,000. So this kind of messes with the goal of metering. Your whole goal is to avoid denial of service, and because you might end up crafting a transaction that does not cost too much gas, but costs a ton of ZK cycles, you might end up crafting a transaction that just takes a lot of effort to prove. And this is quite important for any L2 that has a fraud proving mechanism, because someone might craft a fraudulent state transition that relies on one of these transactions being very hard to prove, potentially might take longer to prove than the dispute period allotted for proving fraud. So this gets even worse when you look at precompiles. I know I should be promoting what we've built, but I have to be very precise with you, because we honestly, we're going to fix all of this. It's just funny to look at right now. And it's also important from a security perspective for the current design. When you look at pairing, for example, which is usually 79,000 gas, it's actually 500 million cycles per pairing. And that is a comical number. That is quite large. An entire Ethereum block without pairings might take 1.5 billion. But if you have one pairing, that's like a third more work to do. Yeah, multiplication, all of the EC operations are not very forgiving, except for addition, maybe. But yeah, what are we going to do about that? We're going to accelerate some of these operations. So as I mentioned, the RISC-0 ZK VM is actually for programs, but you can actually attach so-called accelerators that speed up certain operations. And this is mostly necessary for cryptographic operations, which might just get inefficiently compiled down to a ton of RISC-V instructions. So one example of an accelerated operation is our SHA-2 precompile. In gas terms, it's only 60 as a base cost, plus 12 per additional 32 bytes. In terms of cycles, let's say forgiving 3,000, and a much more forgiving 100 additional cycles per additional 32 bytes, and most of the 3,000 here are just mainly due to the way that Revim calls into our patch for SHA-2, so that can even be further optimized. So, what does the future hold for us? Well, as I mentioned, hopefully more accelerated precompiles for the ZK VM in general, more robust accelerators, and namely the tool to actually build your own accelerator. It should be our next major tool to release. And also improvements to our proving system, mainly faster proving. For Zeth, the future probably holds more features. We're not going to discontinue that anytime soon, and possibly more chains. For you, however, for your apps, well, you tell me. I hope it's exciting for you. I'm actually much further ahead of time than I planned, and that is my talk. Thank you.